In 1962, when Detroit was obsessed with size, chrome, and safe designs, a strange new machine appeared that looked nothing like the cars around it. It had no front grille, its body was smooth and futuristic, and to many, it looked more like a spaceship than a Studebaker. But this wasn't just another car launch. This was a desperate gamble to save one of America's oldest automakers from collapse. The Studebaker Avanti wasn't designed to follow the market. It wasn't meant to play it safe. It was a radical idea born out of crisis, a car so unusual that even today it feels like it arrived decades too early. Some called it genius, others called it madness. And while it failed in its own time, the Avanti has since become a legend for daring to defy everything America thought a car should be. But how did a dying company produce one of the most futuristic cars of the 1960s? And why did it vanish almost as quickly as it appeared? 1. Studebaker's crisis. By the early 1960s, Studebaker was living on borrowed time. Once a proud pioneer that had built wagons before Henry Ford even dreamed of the Model T, the company had now become a shadow of itself. Its factories were outdated, its cars looked tired next to the sleek designs from Ford and Chevrolet, and morale inside the company had sunk to an all-time low. Every year, the numbers told the same brutal story: sales slipping, costs rising, and critics predicting the company's death within just a few years. To make matters worse, Studebaker couldn't compete with the scale of Detroit's giants. While Ford and GM rolled cars off assembly lines by the millions, Studebaker was barely scraping by, producing a fraction of that. Then, in 1961, something unusual happened. Instead of turning to another auto industry veteran to save the company, Studebaker appointed Sherwood Egbert, a man with no background in cars at all. Egbert had come from the world of heavy equipment and marketing, and he thought differently from the traditional executives who had let Studebaker slide into decline. Where others saw a slow death, Egbert saw a chance for reinvention. He believed that the only way to grab America's attention again wasn't through another safe sedan or work truck. It had to be something bold, something shocking, something that would make people look twice. And from that radical mindset, one daring idea began to form. 2. A secret design in Palm Springs. Sherwood Egbert didn't waste time. If Studebaker was going to survive, it needed a car so radical that it would shake the entire industry awake. But designing such a machine through normal corporate channels would take years, time Studebaker simply didn't have. So Egbert turned to a designer who was anything but traditional, Raymond Loewy, the legendary industrial artist behind everything from the Coca-Cola bottle to locomotives and aircraft interiors. Loewy had already shaped some of Studebaker's earlier cars, but this time, Egbert gave him a nearly impossible task: create a futuristic sports car in just a few months. Loewy didn't call in an army of draftsmen or endless committees. Instead, he retreated to a rented bungalow in Palm Springs with a tiny handpicked team of designers: Bob Andrews, John Epstein, and Tom Kellogg. With a California desert sun blazing outside, they sketched, sculpted, and argued late into the night, fueled by Egbert's vision and the knowledge that failure meant the end of Studebaker. What emerged wasn't just a car, it was a statement. A long, smooth fiberglass body with no grille, only a low shark-like nose. Curves that seemed more European than American. A shape that looked like it belonged on the cover of a science fiction novel. Egbert called it the Avanti, Italian for forward. And when he first laid eyes on the clay model, he knew this was the bold gamble that could either resurrect Studebaker or bury it for good. 3. The public reveal and shockwaves in Detroit. In April 1962, the world finally saw what had been brewing in secret. At the New York International Auto Show, Studebaker pulled the cover off the Avanti, and jaws dropped. This wasn't just another American car. The Avanti looked like it had landed from the future. Its fiberglass body gleamed under the lights, its nose carried no grille, and its silhouette seemed impossibly sleek compared to the bulky sedans Detroit was pumping out. Reporters swarmed, photographers snapped away, and almost instantly, the press declared the Avanti a design triumph. America's first four-passenger sports car, Studebaker boldly advertised, positioning it as a direct rival to the Corvette, Thunderbird, and even European exotics. But it wasn't just the looks. Under the hood, buyers could spec the Avanti with Studebaker's V8, tuned for high performance. In supercharged form, it was capable of speeds that rivaled the best sports cars in the world. In fact, the Avanti soon set speed records at the Bonneville Salt Flats, cementing its reputation as more than just a pretty face. Detroit's big players took notice. Here was little Studebaker, supposed to be on its deathbed, suddenly grabbing headlines and making Chevrolet and Ford executives nervous. For a brief moment, It looked like Sherwood Egbert's crazy gamble was working. But behind the scenes, storm clouds were already gathering, because Studebaker had made one critical miscalculation. 4. The production disaster. The Avanti might have wowed the press, but building it was another story entirely. Studebaker had promised thousands of eager buyers that their futuristic sports car was just around the corner. The problem? The company simply wasn't ready to deliver. Unlike Detroit's giants, Studebaker didn't have deep resources or massive assembly lines. To save money, they decided to build the Avanti's radical fiberglass body through subcontractors. On paper, it seemed smart: outsource the tricky part and speed up production. In reality, it was a nightmare. Fiberglass panels didn't fit together the way they were supposed to. Some warped, some cracked, and others showed waves and ripples in the finish. Workers spent endless hours sanding, adjusting, and refitting panels by hand, killing any chance of efficient mass production. Cars that should have rolled off the line in weeks sat unfinished for months. Dealers who had taken deposits grew furious as customers walked away. Orders were cancelled, trust was broken, and the Avanti's reputation began to crack, just like its body panels. Sherwood Egbert had wanted a car to save Studebaker, but instead, each delay and each broken promise pushed the company closer to the edge. Worse still, Egbert himself was suddenly sidelined by illness, leaving Studebaker leaderless right when it needed him most. The Avanti was supposed to be a miracle. Instead, it was quickly turning into a production disaster that even Detroit was quietly smirking at. 5. The collapse of Studebaker. By late 1963, the cracks were no longer just in the fiberglass, they were in the company itself. Studebaker was bleeding money, sales of their regular cars were collapsing, and the Avanti, once hailed as the savior, was dragging them down even further. Sherwood Egbert, the visionary behind the Avanti, had been struck with aggressive cancer. His absence left the company adrift, with no one to push through the delays and rally the workforce. Dealers, frustrated with broken promises, turned their backs. Customers who once lined up to buy the futuristic coupe now doubted they'd ever see one delivered. Studebaker had hoped to build tens of thousands of Avantis. In reality, fewer than 5,800 were ever produced before the company shut down its South Bend, Indiana assembly lines in December 1963. It was a devastating blow. The oldest surviving American automaker, founded before Ford or General Motors, was officially finished in the United States. The Avanti, once touted as the car that would lead Studebaker into a bold new future, became a symbol of its downfall. For Detroit's Big Three, it was proof that no small company could challenge their dominance. For Studebaker's loyal fans, it was a heartbreaking end of an era. But surprisingly, the Avanti's story didn't end with Studebaker's death. In fact, what came next would be one of the strangest resurrection stories in automotive history. 6. The strange resurrection of the Avanti. When Studebaker shut its South Bend factory in 1963, most assumed the Avanti would vanish into obscurity. But this car was too bold, too unusual, to die so easily. Enter two South Bend Studebaker dealers, Leo Newman and Nate Altman. They saw something in the Avanti that corporate executives never fully understood: a passionate cult following. Instead of letting it fade away, they bought the rights, the tooling, and the design from Studebaker and decided to build it themselves. Thus was born the Avanti II. Produced in tiny numbers starting in 1965, the new cars were hand-built with Chevrolet Corvette engines under the hood. Quality was still hit or miss, but buyers didn't care. To them, the Avanti wasn't just a car, it was a statement. A middle finger to Detroit conformity. For the next several decades, the Avanti passed through a carousel of small companies and eccentric owners. Each promised to revive it, each built a handful of cars, and each eventually struggled to keep it alive. At one point, Avantis were being built in Indiana, then Ohio, and even as far away as Mexico. No other American car had a story quite like this, kept alive by sheer passion, stubbornness, and the refusal of a few true believers to let it go extinct. By the late 1980s, however, the magic was fading. The design, unchanged for decades, felt frozen in time. Production dwindled to a trickle, and by the early 2000s, the Avanti's long and bizarre afterlife finally sputtered out. But even in its strange rebirths, the Avanti secured something Studebaker never could: immortality as a cult classic. 7. The legacy of the Avanti. Today, the Studebaker Avanti is remembered not as a failure, but as one of the most daring experiments in American automotive history. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't profitable. But it was fearless. The Avanti proved that a small company could take risks the giants of Detroit wouldn't dare. A car with space-age design, futuristic safety features, and performance to rival America's best muscle cars, all years ahead of its time. Collectors now see the Avanti not as the car that killed Studebaker, but as the car that refused to die. Survivors of the original 1963 to 1964 run are prized treasures, with their Raymond Loewy styling still looking futuristic even 6 decades later. And those quirky Avanti 2 models? They've become cult icons, a testament to how much passion this design inspired. Most importantly, the Avanti left a lasting impression on automotive culture. Its boldness influenced later American sports coupes, and its never-say-die history keeps it alive in documentaries, car shows, and the hearts of enthusiasts who value individuality over conformity. It's ironic. Studebaker built the Avanti to save itself, and it failed. But in the end, the Avanti outlived Studebaker by nearly 40 years. A strange, poetic legacy for a car that was always ahead of its time. The Studebaker Avanti was more than just a car, it was a last stand, a gamble, and ultimately a symbol of defiance. It couldn't save Studebaker, but it etched its name into history by refusing to be forgotten. From its radical fiberglass design to its supercharged speed records, from its death in South Bend to its bizarre rebirths under new owners, the Avanti carved out a story unlike any other. It wasn't the car of the masses, it was the car of dreamers, rebels, and believers who saw beauty in being different. And maybe that's why it still captivates us today. The Avanti teaches us that even when the odds are stacked against you, daring to be bold can leave a legacy that outlasts failure. So, the next time you see one of these rare machines at a car show or in a collector's garage, remember, you're not just looking at a car. You're looking at the ghost of a company, the vision of designers who refused to play it safe, and a machine that proved being ahead of your time is both a curse and a gift.